Peter Dutton's budget reply. Let's have a look. Good evening, everyone. Florian here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee because I thought we'd have a look at Peter Dutton's budget reply, everyone. I've got it up here. Let's have a look. So, budget in reply. Let's have a look at what he has to say, and we'll skip over some of the boring things. So, here's 5 things the Treasurer failed to mention which are important to all Australians. 10 million Australians who earn under 126,000 are facing a tax hike, and around 175,000 more Australians will be unemployed. Yep. Millions of middle Australians, the backbone of our country, are worse off. This government is spending an additional $185 billion, yet middle-income Australians won't receive 1 cent. That's not a lie. I think there are a lot of people, a lot of viewers of the channel, who are just looking at the budget thinking how much they're going to be screwed over. They're not going to get any handouts. Amidst a housing and rental crisis, our migration numbers will increase massively by 1.5 million people over 5 years, the highest number in our country's history, and more than the population of Adelaide. Without addressing housing supply and infrastructure, where will these people live? Now, this is a very important point. But the problem is you can't have a mature and sensible discussion about migration or immigration into Australia at the moment. Everyone's going to be yelling, it's xenophobic, it's racist, all this garbage coming out from the lefties. It's the reality of the infrastructure and the capacity of our country. Sure, it's a huge country, but we're all living. Most of the people live in 3 cities. Okay, think about it. They're not going to deal with it. They're not going to address immigration or migration population growth. And they're not going to be able to ensure sufficient housing supply. So just remember that when you hear the doomers proclaim housing is going to crash. Okay, that this is one of the pillars of our housing market and overheated prices. Your power bills are still going up by more than $500. Power isn't going to get cheaper, no matter what the politicians say. It's all bullshit. This shift to variable renewable energy is not going to be cheaper. Okay? Just wait and see. As a result of the government's policies, inflation will only stay higher for longer, continuing to grind down real incomes for households. Just as Labor withholds the truth, it also breaks its promises. In the last 12 months, the government has broken 12 promises to the Australian people. Above all, it promised the Australians would be better off. It promised cheaper mortgages. Yeah, I mean, but all sensible people, sensible people know not to believe anything that the government promises you. I guess it's more to do with experience, to be honest. I think there are a lot of young people now that are realizing that Labor are not the good guys, that there's not really very much difference between the 2 major parties. I was shocked at seeing some of the comments on Twitter of people who were really, they were putting all their hopes on this budget fixing their lives. What does that tell you? How sad is the state of your life if you're at that point where you're hoping on the budget to turn things around for you? How have we gotten to that point where that's a large cohort of Aussies? It promised no changes to your super. It promised that your taxes wouldn't increase, but that your real wages would. It promised nurses in aged care homes 24/7. And it promised a $275 cut to your power bill on 97 occasions. Labor will say anything to get into power. Once in government, they do the opposite. Really feels like it, doesn't it? I mean, they'll lie. I still remember the Mediscare campaign being sent by text messages. I remember years ago handing out how to vote cards, and there was a Labor guy there literally lying to old people, deceiving them. Tonight, the coalition remains focused on strengthening the economy, making sure that our hard-working middle class can get ahead and do not become Labor's working poor. That's the thing. They want to turn you into their working poor, so you vote for all their garbage. And keeping Australia safe and secure. Good economic management and managing budgets is important to the coalition and to your family. I don't think any government can claim to be good economic managers. It just happens to be how lucky they are. Not as an end in itself, but because it can pay for outcomes that help people. We want to help those in need. We want to give people choices in their own lives. I think this is a fundamental difference between the parties. There's very little difference between them, but you're going to find more people that have an individualistic mindset in the LNP than in Labor. Labor are going to want to control your life. The Greens are going to want to control your life, where there's less people that inclined in this side of politics. I personally don't think the Liberal Party goes anywhere near far enough defending individual liberty, but, stepping stones. We believe in lower taxes to allow Australians who work hard to keep their money. The government's budget is no different to the budget of your family or small business. I hate seeing families hurt under Labor's mismanagement. Families working hard but barely keeping their heads above water. It was like this when I was growing up and Labor was in power. Dad a bricklayer and mum a daycare mum working incredibly hard. They didn't have much money. I remember the difficult conversations around our dinner table as we pored over the family budget trying to find ways to pay the next bill and cut back expenses. Every dollar matters. And it does again today. I suspect there are going to be a lot of families that start having these same conversations. Honestly. Particularly with the interest rates going up. But there's a big divide in Australia now. And you've got a lot of well-off civil servants who will happily vote left, happily vote Labor, who will happily vote for policies that will crush the poor and not even realise or care about it. Today, millions of Australians in their homes and businesses are having similar conversations. The only money the government earns is from taxes paid by you. That money needs to be spent wisely. The government has benefited from the last 9 years of coalition strong economic management. The books they inherited had the lowest unemployment rate in almost 50 years. We created 2 million jobs over 9 years. We bequeathed interest rates at historic lows. I don't know if that was a good thing. Of course, Labor has also benefited from company tax receipts and the revenue generated from soaring coal, gas, and other mining commodities, which they want to get rid of. It's so stupid. I don't get it. I do not understand. This shows you how Labor has lost their roots. They're now beholden. Well, I mean, what's the majority union member now? Middle-aged woman working in a public sector job. It's not the old working class bloke in a coal mine, is it? It's a sector they give little support to publicly, but a sector with which they're always willing to spend the benefits. Given the revenues from mining and tax receipts in this budget, there should be a surplus next year as well. But as we move further away from the coalition years, the budget projects that the economic numbers increasingly deteriorate. There's more spending than the government earns, and that's exactly always what gets Labor government into trouble. We don't need 10,000 more public servants in Canberra on top of the already 181,000 public servants. That's insane. That is insane. I honestly don't think public servants should be able to vote. I think it's a conflict of interest. What do you reckon, guys? Should they lose the right to vote while they're working for the government? We don't need Labor's truckie tax because transport companies will pass it on and higher prices will be paid by you. Yeah, 100%. We don't need inflationary spending. We don't need more spending in aged care. Oh, we do need more spending in aged care. We support the budget measures in aged care, which build on the $30 billion invested by the government. Australians who've worked hard, raised a family and paid taxes deserve a dignified and respectful life as they age. The aged care system has been understrained for decades, and we support the additional investment. It's incredibly important given the increasing need to take care of elderly Australians. For example, those diagnosed early in life with dementia. Like many Australians, I know only too well the terrible impact of such disease on beloved family members. Aged care funding is not a magic pudding. A respectful, dignified, world-class aged care system is only funded by residents or taxpayers. I want to work with the government to ensure that our aged care system remains sustainable. I'm a person of my word. And as I stated in my last budget reply, we support sustainable funding in the NDIS. The budget shows the government reducing NDIS spending growth. I call on the government to outline how this will be achieved. NDIS participants and their family deserve to know. Oh, well, there you go. We live in the best country in the world. But at the moment, millions of Australians are hurting and have been forgotten by this government. They're feeling the pain of the cost of living crisis, as well as the government's energy policy crisis, which is just driving electricity and gas bills higher and higher every day. In this budget, despite the government's energy policies, your electricity bill is still going up by more than $500. Yet you were promised on 97 occasions by this Prime Minister it would go down by $275. I would love to see a copy of anyone's power bill that has gone down by $275 since Mr Albanese made that promise. Moreover, Labor's promise that the average household power bill would be around $1,200 in 24 or 25. Based on forecasts in the budget, this will be in excess of $2,000 per annum. Yeah, but it's, it's going to reduce the particulate emissions in Australia and have no impact on the world, because all the infrastructure that we're installing is built in countries that manufacture it using fossil fuels and has significant embodied energy that might not be paid off in the lifespan of the infrastructure, but still, people feel good. Australians thought there was help on the way in this budget. I think people really did. I think people really thought there'd be help in this budget. But a family with children and a mortgage is $25,000 worse off under Labor. Very few Australians can say they're better off today than 12 months ago when Labor was elected. So, a response to budget measures. As I said in my budget reply last year, we support good policy and stand against bad policy. In the October budget, we supported several of the government's measures. We also provided bipartisan support to the AUKUS security deal. We've supported almost 70 pieces of legislation since Labor formed. In the budget, we also support several measures. Increased bulk billing, expanding the parental payment, and the additional investment in women's safety and implementation of the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children, which builds on the $3.5 billion coalition investment in women's safety initiatives. You'd hate to be a man that's suffering from intimate partner violence, wouldn't you? You'd get nothing. Cost of living. Australians giving new governments the benefit of the doubt, but we think of how hard Labor has made things just after 1 year. Australians around our country are grappling with mounting costs. Your mortgage repayment, gas and electricity bills, supermarket and petrol station receipts, and insurance premiums are evidence. They need to cut the petrol excise. Why don't they cut it? They've got $4 billion a year, make a small cut to that. Maybe cut some of the spending they did and pass that on to all Australians. The number of businesses which have gone into insolvency has almost doubled in a year. Yeah, it has, but it was really low, so you can't really play that. The problem is Labor's inflation. He's tagging them with it. At 7%, it's well above 2 to 3% target. International factors feed inflation, like the war in Ukraine, but the main ingredient is the domestic factors. Domestic inflation. If domestic inflation wasn't a factor, Australia's inflation will be comparable across economies, but it's not. At 6.6%, Australia's core inflation, the best measure of inflation, is higher than every G7 nation. The government has taken decisions and avoided others which have made inflation higher than it needs to be. It often happens when Labor is in power because they can't manage money. Labor recklessly spends, carelessly cuts and inadequately saves. When you hear the government constantly blaming Putin's invasion for inflation, they're being deceptive. Australia's inflation woes are of Labor's own making. Inflation is coming from Canberra. The Labor's big spending budget will only fuel inflation and make life harder for millions of Australians. As soon as they were released, the budget lock-up, economist after economist stepped up to the microphone. They warned Australians this big spending budget was going to make the Reserve Bank's job even harder. Speaking on the Reserve Bank lifting interest rates, respected economist Chris Richardson said, I had thought that the Reserve Bank was done and dusted, but this has notably raised the chance that there will be another swing at the baseball bat. The government spending has increased by a staggering $185 billion over 5 years compared to our last budget. The Treasurer's cost of living relief is only temporary. That temporary relief is targeted at Australians on welfare, but at the expense of the many, including Labor's working poor. It's a band-aid now, but much more pain later. And the government spending is only going to fuel the nation's inflation. This budget is a missed opportunity at economic structural reform and building a stronger economy, immigration and housing. The Albanese government's Big Australia approach will make cost of living crisis and inflation worse. We all support a well-planned migration program, and that's the history of coalition governments. But over 5 years, net overseas migration will see our population increase by 1.5 million people. This is the biggest migration surge in our country's history, and it's occurring amidst a housing and rental crisis. Australians are struggling to rent or purchase a property now. Yeah, this is... The tables need to turn. This is the opportunity that Dutton has to bring this to a mature and sensible debate about immigration levels in Australia. Let's see if it can happen. The National Housing and Finance and Investment Corporation estimates 138,000 homes will be built in Australia in 2024, falling well short of current demand. The Australian government is now proposing to bring in almost 6,000 people per week, which will make a bad situation worse. Cities, towns and suburbs are already choking with congestion. Yet in this budget, as it did in the last, the government is cutting infrastructure spending already announced. And it will take the axe to the coalition's $120 billion infrastructure pipeline, which was designed to bust congestion. A coalition government will sensibly manage migration as it has done in the past, in conjunction with proper infrastructure planning. Today, I affirm a policy commitment to allow Australians to use their super to buy their first home, a policy which will practically support young people and separated women, because the best way to empower Australians is to make them masters of their fate through home ownership. Yeah, I agree with this idea. I know it's going to overheat the sector, but I don't care. It's people's money, and a home is going to be savings for them. Just the same as super. They'll downsize when they get older. Incentivize it. You need to get people owning their own home. This is what the coalition needs to find a way to make happen, because otherwise you won't have Conservatives. If we don't get more young Australians owning their homes, we're going to lurch even more and more down a socialist path. And then no one will own everything. It'll be like the World Economic Forum bloody meme, won't it? Energy. Only a coalition government can reduce power prices because we have the track record. Oh, we'll see. Let's see if he proposes nuclear. Something sensible. If you really are concerned about the environment and the embodied carbon the carbon and the embodied energy that we use in our energy production, nuclear is the best solution. If you're scared about it, it means you're uneducated. Under the last 2 years of the coalition government, electricity prices went down by 8% for households. That's a drop of $128 a year. In those 2 years, power costs went down by 10% for small businesses. Minister Bowen was the worst performer in multiple portfolios during the Rudd and Gillard government. As Energy Minister today, his policies are driving your electricity and gas prices even higher. On the 1st of July, power prices are set to rise by 33% for almost 250,000 small businesses and 1.6 million households. 33%, guys. What's that going to do to businesses? If you think you're paying a lot now, you're only going to pay more. Labor clearly has us on the wrong energy path. Australians deserve much more honest, more sensible, and less emotional discussion on energy. It's not going to happen. This is the problem. There's so many people are so stupid. They believe the world is going to end in a couple of years. That they literally, it's ideological at that point. They're possessed. Like, it's a religious fanaticism over the environment. This is going to hurt the poor more than anything. Businesses' power prices going up, everything's going to cost more. Everything's going to cost more. This is just the energy should be the cheapest thing in this country. That should be the goal. Forget about all the environmental bullshit. Just focus on getting the price down. We are not going to, here's a quote. Here's a quote from Finkel. If the world were to reduce carbon emissions by 1.3%, what impact would that have on changing climate of the world? And his response that the impact would be virtually nothing. Okay, the 1.3% is Australia's impact on it. We're not going to make any difference, everyone. Hang on, wrong slide. There we go. What else? Let's see what else he has to say here. Wait, where are we at here? So, because energy is crucial to our national success and security. 3 weeks ago, I visited Safcol in South Australia. Tonight, in this gallery, is the CEO of Safcol, Mr. Andrew Mitchell. It's a great business founded in 1945. Today, they're one of the biggest manufacturers of baby food. They also produce packaged foods like soap, like soups, stocks, and sauces, which stock our supermarket shelves. Safcol purchases millions of dollars worth of produce from farmers every year. We want businesses like Safcol to grow, to employ more Australians, and to export to the world. In January, their electricity bill went up 120%. It more than doubled, 120%. There you go. Well, it is South Australia, the renewable heart of Australia. This shows you how stupid this is. The people not get. I'm assuming the people that are voting for these politicians and these policies are either completely uneducated or so protected from the real world. Yeah, it's why you get all the ABC people voting for it, all the government employees voting for it. They've got no idea. They've got no idea of the real world because they're working for government. 120%. With inflation driving up their costs, our food prices then go up. And this is exactly what happens in supermarkets right now. If companies shut up shop on our shores or go elsewhere because of labour's energy crisis, we lose jobs, money, and in industry. And we also lose intellectual capacity too. Global emissions will not go down, or will go up and not down. In that scenario, no one wins. Labour is being deceptive with its energy policy. The scientific reality is that we must firm up the energy grid when renewable energy is unreliable. The latest battery technology installed in Adelaide at a cost of $180 million lasts for 1 hour. So whether you have 50, 75 or 100% renewable, you must still have the fixed cost of firming. To distribute renewable energy, more than $100 billion will need to be spent on 28,000 kilometres of transmission line. That's a lot of copper. That's a lot of embodied energy. That's a lot of concrete to build that. These poles and wires will run through farming land, national parks and suburbs. Aside from the huge environmental impact of this rollout, every dollar spent will be passed on to you in the form of higher electricity bills. We want to see emissions go down. Indeed, between 2013 and 21, the coalition government cut Australia's emissions by 17% while growing the economy and creating jobs. Next generation small modular nuclear technologies are safe, reliable, cost effective, can be plugged into existing grids where they can, where we have turned off coal and emit zero emissions. There you go. Let's see if he has the balls to actually stick with it. In the 21st century, any sensible government must consider small modular nuclear as part of the energy mix. 32 countries, including Canada, China, France, US, and United Kingdom, use zero-emission nuclear power today, including to firm up renewables. 50 countries are exploring or investing in next-generation nuclear technology. Oddly, Labor is happy for similar technology to power our future submarines, but it refuses to consider the benefits of onshore small and micro-modular reactors. With the government against coal and nuclear, gas remains the only viable firming power, yet Labor wants gas gone too. It undermines gas at every turn. With interventions in the market, with price fixing, by funding activists to wage lawfare against new gas supply ventures, in introducing new carbon tax 3 times more than Julia Gillard's, in pushing to electrify homes and businesses despite exorbitant costs for families, and by increasing taxes on offshore gas and oil projects in this budget. The coalition government wants more gas in the domestic system. What matters is what works. Taxation. A key indicator that a government can't manage money is that it comes after yours. On the eve of Easter, Labor axed the former coalition's low and middle income tax offset. Around 10 million Australians earning under $126,000 will be up to $1,500 worse off. Labor abandoned the coalition's tax cap of 23.9%. We will restore the cap. Compared to our last budget over the next 5 years, the taxes paid by Australians will increase by more than $300 billion. In this budget, Labor has slugged our farmers with $153 million tax. They'll be forced to unfairly pay for the risk of international importers, especially at a time when our farmers and producers are facing more uncertainty with rising input costs and workforce shortages. This tax will be passed on to Australians in the form of higher prices at the supermarket. Instead of taxing Australian farmers tonight, I announced the coalition will establish an importer container levy as recommended by the independent Craig Biosecurity Review. Under a coalition government, Australian farmers will not be punished for the biosecurity risks others pose. Labor has been silent on a promise to keep stage 3 tax cuts. Our tax cuts will see 95% of Australian workers keep at least 70 cents in every dollar they earn. With about 400 days before the tax cuts take effect, there's time for Labor to break another promise. In this budget, Labor has doubled the tax on Australians who have worked hard, sacrificed and saved to invest in their super. This move will affect millions of Australians over coming years, including more than 2 million Australians under 25, earning an average wage during their lifetime. The government thinks your super is their money. This tax is an attack on Australians who've worked hard and saved to support themselves and their family. It undermines the fundamentals of our tax system in taxing unrealised capital gains. Imagine your small business, your farm or other assets will support your retirement. Under Labor, you will pay tax on those things before you sell them, impacting your cash flow. Why are people voting for Labor? I think it must just be I don't know. Do people think this is a good tax? They probably don't know what's going on. That's what it has to be. To those who welcome this tax, a word of caution. Being spared by the Labor tax shark doesn't mean you won't be on its menu tomorrow. If Labor can't keep its promise to leave your super alone, any super tax cap will not be set in stone. Taxation is the killer of aspiration. The working individual supports themselves, their family, community, fellow Australians in our country. People should be rewarded for their hard work by keeping more of what they earn so they won't become the new working poor. The more you keep from what you earn, the less you're dependent on the state. Yes. Yeah. And the more freedom and choice you have to realize your aspirations. They don't want you to have freedom or choice. You want to be a well-behaved little pleb. Be it studying, traveling, educating children, starting a business, owning a home, or retiring comfortably. Your money is your money, not the government's. Under a coalition-led government, your taxes will always be lower. Let's see. Better mental and women's health. What is he looking at here? They want to increase the Medicare subsidized psychological sessions from 10 to 20. Labor dropped it back to 10. They'll restore it to 20 sessions and subsidize them on a permanent basis. I mean, the lockdowns and restrictions highlighted the inadequacies of our mental health system. I'm shocked that we don't already have this capacity. So I think it's a good move. What else? A safer and better society. Safer Communities Fund, support at-risk communities across the nation, multicultural communities to protect places of worship. As a police officer, I attended my first domestic violence incidents at 19 and countless others over my decade-long career. From that time, I committed myself to protecting women and children from violence. What else? 70 million Australian Centre. Yep. I'm getting tired here. They want to reinstate the cashless debt card in communities who seek to have it. I honestly... If at the community level they choose and vote for this and want this, let them have it. It wasn't federal government forcing it on communities. The communities were asking for it because they've got huge social issues. Let them have it. We should have more governance at the local level. That should be the most important. The communities should be able to decide how they run their communities. So I've got no problem with that at all. Let's keep going. Job seeker. What else? Jobs change lives, families, and communities. Much hyped Jobs and Skills Summit. They want to keep it for over 55s. They want to support the increase to rent assistance. That is directly linked to rent paid. If Labor had made this change, a job seeker picking up extra shifts and taking home $300 a fortnight could still receive their full job seeker allowance. Okay, they want to increase the amount that people can pay, that people can earn before losing their job seeker. That's probably, I like that idea because it's the path out of a poverty trap. Okay? Don't feel bad about some people keeping more of their dole money. You want to get them employed, and that's the path out of it. Otherwise, they get trapped. Defense, we'll have a look. In conclusion, Australians will be disappointed with the Albanese government's second budget, which adds to inflation and cost of living. And there we go. Are you better off than you were 12 months ago? So let's have a bit of a talk about this one, guys. So some interesting points there in the budget. I mean, Dutton's coming out swinging against Labor, which he has to do. Encouraging to hear talk of nuclear energy. And highlighting the impact the huge population growth is going to have on Australia and our housing costs. Let's see if those issues are enough to swing some votes to the coalition side. And remember, this is the first experience of a federal Labor government for a lot of people. Maybe they've got to learn. What do you reckon, guys? Let's see. As always, thanks for watching. Check out HeiseBim or Heise Does. And if you're a fan and enjoy the content I create here, you can support us on YouTube or Patreon. Use our referral links, buy Pocket Squares, or call us if you need an architect. Take care, have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next episode of HeiseSays. Bye for now.